Hello, my fellow chatterers and book lovers, and anyone else who's popped in because you're curious about what this is or you have got a bit lost. Welcome, everyone. I'm Chatty, this is my channel, Chatty the Mad Chatter, and I'm going to be chatting away madly about section 8 of my segmented study section. I think I usually call them parts. Don't know where section came from. Anyway, maybe I enjoy alliteration. It's basically my vlog for the Magical Readathon, which is a readathon created by G from the channel Book Roast, and all of the details are in the description. This was a readathon that happened in August. We are now just in the first week of October, so I'm still going. These are books I read in September, but I'm giving you my thoughts on them because they do link to the journey that I was doing, which was doing Star Whisperer Calling with the added class of alchemy, and decided to do a vlog of that. My character PioLurs is a bit of a swot, and he really wants to do like so much more. So he is studying a few more books, but I'm not gonna like vlog all of those. I'm just gonna like do a little wrap up further down the line, hopefully before April, where we start the next one. We'll see. Anyway, on this channel, I cannot edit. It is just one long continuous take because my laptop can't cope with any editing software, so we just click upload. So I only have the power of pause to aid me, and it's probably going to be chaos and waffle, but here we go. Cheers, everyone. Clink, clink, clink. One shot, no editing. So the next book that I'm going to be talking about is Mary Stewart's The Last Enchantment, which is the third and final book in her Merlin trilogy. And this is an adult fantasy, and I read this for, I read it for Alchemy Silver into Gold, which was to read a book that was finishing a series. So obviously worked well. It's finishing a series, so there we go, win-win. If you heard me talk about the Hollow Hills, you'll know that I really enjoyed like the historical setting of this one, with the mixture between like the Roman, like the kind of the remnants of the Roman gods and kind of the Celtic ways of doing things, and also kind of the incoming of Christianity. And what I've really enjoyed about Mary Stewart's take on the Legend of Arthur by following Merlin is we have much more of a magical realism feel. So if we see Merlin's powers as kind of like divine intervention, so it's more of kind of like he's been gifted these spiritual powers from the gods. So whether we're thinking of it's the Roman gods, because he wasn't sure, or the Christian god, that's kind of where his power comes from, rather than kind of any kind of witchcraft or any kind of like his dad is a demon or anything like that. It was very much kind of more based in as much kind of history of the period than anything else, and the magic just comes from the more spiritual kind of miraculous side of things. And I'm really kind of enjoying that aspect of it, where it's much more grounded in realism, and the things that Merlin does that people find amazing is to do with like herbology, which is to do with like healing and biology and like understanding of herbs and medicines, and also like his engineering and the ability to kind of like make great structures. So that's kind of where all of that comes from. I did struggle a little bit with the misogyny in the Hollow Hills. It's not blatant, it was just more how certain characters were dealt with and kind of were referred to and seen by Merlin. The whole kind of concept of women, if they've got a kind of agency, they're almost seen as witches, or they are these like dutiful virgins. Whereas in this one it wasn't so cut and dry, which I appreciated. So it was a bit more, you had moments of being slightly more sympathetic, and you had moments of other female characters in here that were given much more of a, I don't know what the word is, were treated more fairly, I suppose, were not just judged fully on appearances, and I appreciated that. I did very much enjoy, there seemed to be like sort of like 3 moments in here. It's like there was like a beginning kind of moment of intrigue, and kind of faster paced plotting. And then there was like a middle one, and then there was a final one where it felt slightly more actioned. And in between, you kind of had more sort of laying the groundwork of what's happening now and kind of where we found ourselves in history and Merlin's own personal journey, and also a lot of kind of politicking as to how things were seen and stuff that was kind of going on. So it picks up from where the other one left off. Arthur has just been crowned king, and Merlin kind of helps at certain points and then kind of leaves you at other points. So it very much follows Merlin. It's very much about Merlin and his story rather than any kind of like story following Arthur and his knights, as it were. So that's quite interesting of seeing, you know, what Merlin finds the most important. But the relationship between Merlin and Arthur is really lovely. I do enjoy their relationship. They are kind of like, it is very much like a father and son relationship than anything else. And I do kind of enjoy how there are certain betrayals and tragedies within the Arthurian legend that Mary Stuart puts her own spin on and kind of puts it in a different light to what it is. So I can say with all good conscience, so my mum, these are my mum's books. Nata lent them to me. We have both enjoyed Mary Stuart's thrillers. And mum had these and was like, oh, it's such a shame. This is really amazing writing from her and it's great, but I don't want to read them because I know it's sad. Mum, you can read them. It's going to be okay. You can definitely read them. So I kind of felt that I was going to get annoyed and like the Guinevere storyline was going in a certain way, but Mary Stuart did actually pull on kind of a lot of what choices do women have for this. We do have some kind of explorations of what it would have meant to have been abducted and how we could look at victim, like it did kind of look at sort of like early victim blaming. Like this was written in the 1979, so good few years ago now, definitely a good few years ago. And the whole kind of concept of if you don't struggle and if you don't try to escape, were you really trying? Whereas it explores looking at using the only, you know, your physical strength is not, if your physical strength is not going to help you, you're isolated, there's nothing else kind of there, what things have you got to fall back on? And I suppose what you've got to fall back on is try to talk your way out of it, try to talk your way into a different thing and kind of maybe hold the violence at bay by appearing compliant for as long as possible. And I appreciated that being explored in here. There was another moment as well where I can't remember who it was that were discussing it, but I think it was two male characters again, obviously Merlin was involved, where they were talking about how little women have in life to, you know, make choices from. Like they choose to get married, but in terms that's almost a kind of slavery and kind of looking at like their lack of power in here. So I did appreciate those conversations happening. And so we do get two women with agency to a certain amount. Like I feel it would have been more fun if we had got more of a relationship between Merlin and Guinevere, to have explored Guinevere a little bit more. Like the exploration of her character kind of just comes from Merlin reflecting, rather than him seeing it happening in the present time with Guinevere. So it's more him reflecting on her personality. But we get to see her and her kind of like holding her own in this court to a certain extent. Like she's still very limited kind of in this story, but for all intents and purposes, the fact that she as an outsider stays in this court and stays in her position alongside Arthur dealing with all court politics is an achievement. We also get to meet, I'm going to say the name wrong. I'm going to say Nimune. Let me see if I can just have a quick look again. See how that goes. So it's like Ninian or Nimue. I'm going for Nimue. Nimue, who I think in the traditional tale is often seen as like betraying Merlin and actually being like a minion of Morgana, whereas in here it's a very different story. So again, we have a female who has agency, who is learning to weave magic. And it was interesting given how Merlin shut down Morghese and kind of was a little bit dismissive of Morgana and her kind of, or Morgan and her place for power. But was quite happy to instruct Nimue. So it's very interesting, almost like a bit of a hypocrisy going on there. But I would like to think that Merlin is like, actually, maybe I have misjudged women, because I believe this one can wield power fairly. I'd like to think that was going on, but that was not like sold through the story. It was just, I will instruct you. Anyway, overall, again, the language, the way it was written, I really enjoyed Mary Stuart's writing. I had a really fun time with this. I probably would never read it again. It's just because I can't really cope with the misogyny. It wasn't not as prevalent in this one, but we still got to meet both of Arthur's sisters again in various points. And yeah, it all kind of, it doesn't end with like, the fall of Camelot or anything. It ends sort of before the legend gets to that point. So it feels fine. Yeah, so I really have anything more to say. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. I had a good time, but it's not like an all-time favorite. And I think again it's because of the time it was written in, like the attitudes of the time. But I think the historical writing was great. And I think my favorite was the Crystal Caves, like the first one, just because there wasn't a lot of misogyny in that one so much, and it was really interesting seeing Merlin as this young, as a sort of like a young child, and kind of the journey that Merlin goes on at that point. What was I going to say? I was going to say something else. But I do want to read more kind of Arthurian legends. I'd be very interested to see like other authors' take on things, and also a one where we're following Arthur rather than Merlin. So I think that the other one that I want to read at some point is the one by Bernard Cornwell, because I've heard really good things about that one. Anyway, this is now read, so let's see what PioLurs needs to study next.
For a level O in law, we must study the Tales of the Guild. And for this, we must read a book recommended by a bookseller. And I will be reading The Secrets of a Sun King by Emma Carroll, which is a middle grade historical novel.
So, The Secrets of the Sun King by Emma Carroll. I wasn't specifically this book that I was recommended. I was very keen to talk to booksellers about recommendations, because I just think it's a nice thing to be able to chat about. And if you're a bookseller, you definitely want to talk about your favourite books and encourage people to read them. So I had this whole idea that I was going to have this lovely time, and I went into Waterstones and I went into the fantasy department, because I was like, I quite feel like an adult fantasy. This would be fun. And I think I really bemused the salesperson about, can you please recommend something for me? And they seemed a little stumped by that concept. Or maybe they worked in a different department. Maybe they're usually in kind of like the non-fiction and the improve yourself books, and were a bit stumped in the fantasy section, because they just told me generic ones that I would have already read as a fantasy reader, and then suggested books that I definitely had no intention of reading. So it wasn't great. So I think pretty much within the conversation I was like, I kind of wish I'd never asked, and I would like you to go away now, please, so I can just browse and not have this really awkward conversation now. But I did also go into the Book Nook previously, before this was a prompt, and just organically had a wonderful chat with the people who run the Book Nook. I love the Book Nook. It is a YA and middle grade bookshop, just children's bookshop. It also has picture books and other things in there as well, and they absolutely adore books and talking about books. So I immediately was just chatting about books and things they liked, and the bookseller in there was like, have you read any Emma Carroll? I love her writing, it's fantastic. I was like, no, I have never read any Emma Carroll, but I really want to. I've got a lot of them on my radar. And then when I was on holiday, this was in a secondhand bookshop, and so I picked it up. So this is counting as my bookseller's recommendation because this author was recommended, and this will be my first one. This will be my first Emma Carroll, and I'm very excited. So I've just read the first page, and already, yes, the writing is lovely. You've got a very clear sense of place of the protagonist. There is intrigue. I feel we're going to be kind of setting a lot of good things up in here. So yes, very excited to start reading this one. So Secrets of a Sun Kim is set in 1922. There was a mysterious kind of death in the newspaper, and then that person who died sends a parcel to the protagonist, one of the protagonist's relatives, and she intercepts it and ends up going to Egypt, and there's something to do with kind of like a mummy's tomb. So very keen to see what all this is about. Looking forward to it. Please let me know what you have been reading over the last week. If you've got any thoughts on any of the books I've mentioned, or if you've read something similar, I love to have a chat. Happy reading, everyone.